When you're in the system and ready to process your supplier invoices, you'll need to go to the Stock tab, and then the Receiving Order page. From here you can see all of the invoices that have come in from your suppliers that are waiting to be processed. In the first example, the supplier has included the purchase order number from the order sent to them via CTB on the actual invoice. You can see this because the invoice icon is black. This means it's already linked to the purchase order. In the second example, the purchase order was sent from the system and the supplier has sent in their invoice, but they haven't included the purchase order number on the invoice itself, so you will have to manually link them to one another. To do this, open up the invoice. On the right-hand panel, you can see the invoice details. On the left-hand panel you can see the undelivered purchase orders to choose from. If there are several to choose, you just need to work out which pending order relates to the invoice you're processing. Once you know which order relates to the invoice you're processing, you simply check the box and then select Link to Purchase Order. Here you can see there are items on the invoice that are new to the database. They don't exist in the stock list, so they need to be entered into the system before the invoice can be processed. You will need to update the unit of measure so that the system knows the volume of stock included in the item. We know that one each box can't convert into grams or kilos, so we need to teach the system what volume of stock this item accounts for. To do this, we enter in the quantity and the unit. You'll need to update the units of measure to the correct amounts based on how your supplier invoices you for the items. In this example, the supplier invoices by the kilo and the items are ordered by the kilo, so the unit and packaging type are the same. You can also go ahead and update the stock category assigned to the items. You can then go ahead and add any new items. Sometimes suppliers will change their stock codes or descriptions, which will create new stock items when they are read by Invoice Ripper. If you see a stock item that you believe already exists within that supplier's stock list, make sure you click the link button here, and then try and link this item to an existing stock item within the system. If you look at the whole barramundi, for example, with stock code 111, this item already exists in this supplier's stock list. Using your knowledge of your supplier's stock and your stock lists, you can decide whether they are different items that need to be added separately or whether they are actually the same item with a different code or description. Here you can see the price and description are exactly the same, so we can link the items together. This teaches the system to recognize either item as the same thing, so you won't have to add or link them again. Linking items that are the same also prevents you from creating duplicate stock items in your system database, which will make ordering and stock taking easier. Now you're on the invoice detail page. Here you can compare the invoice to the line items CTB has recognized. If there's anything on the invoice that doesn't look quite right, for example, if we've mapped something incorrectly, or you spot a formatting error, you can flag an extraction issue here and type in your notes. This will send them directly to the Invoice Ripper team, who will then remap the invoice and send it back in for you to process. If everything looks right, you can continue on to checking off the stock items that have been delivered and click Save. If there's anything that wasn't delivered, you can leave the item unchecked. Here we can see everything below the line has been delivered, and everything above the line has not been delivered. You'll see that the total on the invoice does not change because it's a tax document. You cannot partially process it. You either process it in full and request a credit for any discrepancies, or contact your supplier and ask them to reissue the invoice. If you're happy to process the invoice in full, you can request a credit note for the items you need removing from the invoice total by clicking Save. In the next page you will see the item that you marked as undelivered, with a credit note request note next to it, saying incorrect quantity. Because we've linked the original purchase order to the invoice, what we can also see is that the 3 kilos of the local New South Wales bug meat that was included in the original order was not delivered. Instead, it looks like the supplier substituted this item with the Queensland bug meat shown here. You can also see that the crayfish that was ordered has also been substituted, and the invoiced weight of 3.45 kilos is more than the 3.5 that were originally ordered. In this example, the quantity variance is simply due to rounding of the delivered stock. There is an issue here though, because the locked-in price per kilogram for this item is $65, but the supplier has invoiced $72.99 per kilo. Here you can see that the system has recognized this overcharge and prompts the user to request a credit note for the difference in price. Similarly here for the imported crayfish, 2 kilos were ordered but they didn't have any, so they have sent a substitute item instead. If you are happy to accept the substituted stock, you don't need to take any further action for this item. You can work through any other items that you need to request a credit for by selecting one of the drop-down options available here. Once you've looked over all of the items and you're happy, you can click the Approve button to finalize the invoice approval step. This next page is where you will fill in the details for the items you're requesting a credit for. Here you can see the items that have locked-in pricing that were overcharged for. The system has done the maths for me and calculated the overcharge and entered that amount in the credit quantity total. Moving on to the bug meat, we are going to request a partial credit because we were invoiced for 3 kilos, but when we weighted it on delivery, it was short by 1 kilo, so we need to be credited for the missing weight. An extra step you can do is add a bit more detail to the notes section here. This provides more information to the supplier so that when they receive the credit note request, they know exactly what the issue is and can then follow up with their packing team or delivery driver. When you're ready to send the credit note request, you can add any additional notes for them in the email text box, and if necessary, also attach photographs of items requesting a credit if they are damaged or poor quality. When you're ready, you can click Send and all of that information will be sent to the supplier. Once that is sent out of the system, you'll be left with a green shopping cart icon in your receiving orders page, which is a credit note request reminder, similarly to how your pending purchase orders display with a red shopping cart. When the supplier sends in their actual credit note, you can link it to the credit note request that was sent out and then compare the results in the same way that you compare a purchase order to an invoice, so you know whether you have received a full or partial credit.